Politics and Ivy got tales to share. Life in general, we go everywhere. From politics to soul repair. Tune in now, we got time to spare.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We got a ton of requests to cover this interview with Joe Rogan and Mark Zuckerberg. And yeah, it's a long one, so buckle up. This is going to be a deep dive.
It's a really insightful conversation, that's for sure. It gives us a glimpse into how Zuckerberg's views on things like content moderation have changed over time.
Yeah, he started Facebook with this, almost utopian vision of free speech.
Right, total freedom of expression.
But then, fast forward a few years, and he's dealing with election interference and the pandemic and all this pressure from governments and the media. You can kind of sense the disillusionment.
Definitely. I think the pressure from the Biden administration, especially around COVID-19 content, was a real turning point for him. He even talks about that Leonardo DiCaprio meme they wanted taken down. You know the one?
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And he's like, really? This is what we're worried about. It seems like he started questioning whether the pendulum had swung too far in the direction of censorship.
Well, and then there's the whole Hunter Biden laptop situation. Zuckerberg argues that the story was unfairly suppressed and might have even influenced the election. It's a controversial take, for sure, but it raises a question that I think is at the heart of this whole debate. Where do we draw the line between combating misinformation and just straight-up censorship?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like that old analogy of yelling fire in a crowded theater. You can't just let people say whatever they want, especially when it could cause harm.
But the problem is, as Zuckerberg keeps pointing out, Facebook isn't just one theater. It's billions of theaters all yelling different things at once.
Exactly. He's constantly reminding us of the scale of the problem. Moderating content for that many people with that many different opinions and backgrounds, it's a mind-boggling task.
And then there's the issue of bias. Even Zuckerberg admits that fact-checking programs aren't perfect. They have their own biases. So who gets to decide what's true and what's not?
That's why he's become more supportive of these open approaches to content moderation, like Twitter's community notes, which allows users to flag potentially misleading information and add context.
It's like he's lost faith in the idea of a central authority dictating truth, especially with how much trust in traditional media has eroded.
Right. He seems to be saying, look, people are getting their information from social media whether we like it or not, so let's try to make that process as transparent and accountable as possible.
But that puts him at odds with governments who are trying to exert more control over online information.
Yeah, he's particularly critical of the EU's approach, with their massive fines on tech companies. He even compares it to how other countries treat their tech industries, saying that the U.S. government should be doing more to support its own tech companies.
It's like he sees these heavy fines from the EU as almost like a tariff on American innovation. He's worried they're putting U.S. companies at a disadvantage on the global stage.
And the pandemic just amplified those tensions. Zuckerberg felt that governments were overstepping their boundaries by pressuring platforms to remove content, even when it was factually accurate.
Like the stuff about vaccine side effects.
Exactly. He felt it was an attempt to control the narrative, and it seems to have solidified his distrust of government involvement in content moderation.
It's like he went through this trial by fire and came out the other side with an even stronger commitment to free speech, even if it means going against the grain. He's seen firsthand how suppressing information, even with good intentions, can backfire.
And it ties into his argument that the internet has fundamentally changed the power dynamics of information. The old gatekeepers, like the traditional media, are losing their grip, and a new class of what he calls cultural elites is emerging online. He sees this as a positive development, allowing for more diverse voices and perspectives.
Which probably explains his respect for someone like Joe Rogan, who's built this massive independent platform.
Yeah, it's like he admires Rogan's ability to have these long-form, unscripted conversations, diving deep into complex issues without being filtered through a corporate or political lens.
He even talks about how much he hates TV interviews, how they focus on sound bites and often misrepresent his message. It makes you wonder if he sees this interview with Rogan as a chance to finally speak his mind.
You can definitely sense a different energy from him in this conversation. He's more relaxed, candid, even funny at times. It's a stark contrast to his earlier, more robotic public appearances.
Yeah, it's like he's shedding the CEO persona a bit. He even jokes about how people might see his competitive side more clearly when he's fighting in jiu-jitsu than in his role as CEO.
Which is interesting because he talks a lot about jiu-jitsu in this interview, how it helps him manage stress, his training routine, even his wife's reaction to his ACL injury.
It's like stepping onto the mat is his reset button, a way to clear his head and gain some perspective.
He describes it as a way to find balance outside the tech world.
But it's not just about physical release. He talks about how jiu-jitsu has taught him the importance of technique over brute force, something he tries to apply to problem solving in business. He even shares that story about competing in a tournament in disguise, only revealing his identity when he stepped onto the mat.
Oh yeah, that's a classic Zuckerberg story. It shows his willingness to step outside his comfort zone and his competitive spirit.
So we've got Zuckerberg, the disillusioned idealist, the fighter, the tech visionary wrestling with immense power and responsibility. And now, get this, we're about to dive into his thoughts on Apple.
Oh yeah, this is where things get really interesting. Buckle up.
Okay, so we've talked about Zuckerberg's views on open systems and the challenges of content moderation, and it seems like these ideas really come to a head when he starts talking about Apple.
Yeah, Apple's like the poster child for everything he dislikes about the current state of the tech world. This whole closed ecosystem thing, the way they control developers, the high app store fees, it all boils down to what he sees as stifling innovation.
Yeah, he really goes after that 30% cut that Apple takes on app sales. He argues that it's anti-competitive, drives up prices, limits choices for consumers.
And he's not buying Apple's justifications about privacy and security. He sees that as a smokescreen.
Right, it's like they're using privacy as a weapon to maintain their dominance.
Exactly. And he brings up this example of AirPods. You know, how Apple's technology makes it really hard for other companies to make earbuds that connect seamlessly with iPhones. It's like they're intentionally creating this walled garden.
That whole blue bubble versus green bubble phenomenon with iMessage, it's so subtle but so effective.
Oh yeah, total social pressure to conform. It's fascinating that Zuckerberg, who's often criticized for Facebook's own data practices, is the one calling out Apple for using privacy as a weapon.
It makes you wonder if there's a bit of projection going on there.
Maybe. Or maybe he's just genuinely worried about the implications of a company like Apple having so much control. Because let's be honest, we are becoming increasingly reliant on these technologies.
And he even predicts that this closed approach is going to be Apple's downfall, that eventually they'll be overtaken by companies that are more open to collaboration.
It's a bold prediction. But it shows how much he believes in open systems. He contrasts tech with more traditional industries where the big players can stay on top for decades. He says tech moves so fast, you snooze, you lose. You got to constantly be innovating and adapting.
Speaking of disruption, we got to talk about AI. This is where things get really interesting. This is where Zuckerberg's vision for the future really starts to take shape.
He is incredibly bullish on AI, but not in like a robots are going to take over the world kind of way. He sees it as a tool to enhance human capabilities. Like he talks about having AI coworkers, personalized learning, using AI to solve global problems.
Yeah, he uses this analogy about his daughter, how she can play with Legos in the real world, but in Minecraft she has unlimited creative potential. He sees AI giving us that same kind of power to build and create things in ways we can't even imagine right now.
Right, but Rogan pushes back a bit. He asks those tough questions about AI safety. Like, what if AI becomes self-aware? What if it surpasses human intelligence and decides we're obsolete? Which, let's be honest, those are some scary thoughts.
They are, but Zuckerberg's response is actually pretty pragmatic. He says we need to focus on open sourcing AI, distributing it evenly so no single entity has too much control.
He compares a single, super intelligent AI to giving one person control of the internet in its early days. Could be incredibly dangerous.
Right.
But if we have a bunch of different AIs developed by different people with different goals, they can act as checks and balances against each other.
So almost like an AI antivirus program protecting against the malicious code.
Exactly. He says AI is coming whether we like it or not, so let's figure out how to build it safely.
But of course there are concerns about AI and jobs, the economy and all that.
For sure. And Zuckerberg acknowledges that, but he also argues that AI will ultimately create more opportunities. He sees it freeing us from those boring, repetitive tasks, allowing us to focus on more creative, fulfilling work.
And then, out of nowhere, we go from this deep discussion about AI to Rogan giving Zuckerberg archery tips. It's such a bizarre shift in gears.
I know, right? Zuckerberg admits he's just a casual archer, and then Rogan jumps in with all these technical details about proper form and surprise shots. He even tries to convince Zuckerberg to ditch his trigger release for a hinge release, claiming it'll improve his accuracy. Classic Rogan.
You gotta love his enthusiasm. So we've covered Zuckerberg's criticism of Apple, his pretty optimistic take on AI, his love of archery, and yeah, we've covered a lot of ground here. Ready for the final leg of this deep dive.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Zuckerberg's world. We've heard his thoughts on free speech, government overreach, the power of AI, but what about the metaverse? This seems to be where he's putting a lot of his energy these days.
It's definitely more than just a buzzword for him. He really sees it as this next evolution of social interaction, this blending of physical and digital worlds where we can work, play, connect in totally new ways.
He paints this picture of a future where we're all wearing AR glasses or contacts that overlay digital information onto our surroundings.
Like walking down the street and seeing pop-ups about nearby businesses or getting directions projected right into your field of vision.
Exactly. He even talks about attending meetings as holograms, interacting with people from all over the world as if they were physically there in the room with you.
It's almost like teleporting, right? Breaking down geographical barriers, making collaborations so much more immersive.
It sounds pretty wild, but he's clearly all in on this vision. He sees it as a way to enhance our lives, make us more productive, more connected, more human.
And this is where his work on augmented and virtual reality comes in. He sees these technologies as the key to unlocking the metaverse.
He talks about Meta's work on AR glasses, those Ray-Bans with the AI and translation features, and then the more advanced Orion glasses that they're developing.
I can't wait to try those. Remember when you tried those VR gloves? You were painting in 3D space, and it felt like you were actually holding a brush.
Oh, yeah, that was incredible. It really gives you a glimpse into how our interactions with technology are going to evolve. It's not just going to be about looking at screens anymore. We're going to be physically interacting with digital objects.
And Zuckerberg believes this will have a huge impact on everything, how we work, how we learn, how we socialize. He talks about these virtual classrooms where students can immerse themselves in historical events or explore the human body.
And virtual workplaces that can adapt to our needs, making them more collaborative, more engaging.
It all sounds amazing, but I do wonder about some things, like accessibility, for example. Will everyone be able to afford this technology?
Yeah.
Or will it just create a new digital divide?
And what about misuse? Could the metaverse be used to spread misinformation or harmful content, to manipulate people?
These are all valid concerns. And to be fair, Zuckerberg acknowledges that. He talks about open standards, interoperability, making sure the metaverse is built on ethical principles.
Yeah, he emphasizes the need for collaboration, not just between tech companies, but with governments, policymakers, the public. It's like he's saying, we need to build this together.
Shape it in a way that benefits everyone.
So as we wrap up, I'm curious, what stands out to you most about Zuckerberg's vision for the future? What's the one thing that really stuck with you?
Honestly, I think it's his almost unwavering faith in technology. Even after all the challenges he's faced, all the criticism, he still believes that technology can be this force for good in the world.
That's a good point. He's definitely an optimist, and whether you agree with him or not, it's hard not to be at least a little bit inspired by his vision for the future.
For sure, and I think that's what makes this conversation so fascinating. It's a glimpse into the mind of someone who's shaping the future, and it forces us to grapple with these really big questions about technology, society, and what it means to be human in a rapidly changing world.
Absolutely. So for everyone listening, what are your thoughts? Do you share Zuckerberg's optimism? Or are you more cautious? Hit us up on social media, let us know what you think. And as always, thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Alex and Ivy got tales to share. Life in general, we go everywhere.